Hello and welcome to another edition of Parker's Previews powered by The Hammer. I'm Parker, your host, and this week I'm going to have three new plays for you. Pretty excited to talk about some of these games. Last week had a good week, went 3-0. Sometimes, you get some wins, and feels pretty good to do that. Make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, following Parker's Previews on Twitter, me at Stats of War on Twitter, and if you are so inclined to listen to this instead of watch it, you can get the audio version of this wherever you get podcasts. Just search Parker's Previews. This week, I have a good slate of matchups again that I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to start with NC State versus Clemson, a very fun ACC matchup. NC State heads to Clemson. Both teams are 4-0. Both teams have playoff aspirations. Going to be a pretty fun game. Before I dive into the matchup, I do want to say, obviously, there is some pretty significant weather going on this weekend, and I'm not 100% sure where South Carolina, looks in terms of what kind of rainfall they're going to get or what that's going to affect. But I do just want to say my picks are insured against acts of God. We don't have anything here about hurricane projections or weather projections. And so as we talk about this, we'll kind of put that aside, but keep that in the back of your mind as you make important decisions about investment and what you're going to do for this college football game. So on this show, my hope is to use data and analytics and advanced stats to help us be better consumers of college football content and also be smarter investors as we kind of approach important matchups. So I'm pretty excited to get into this week. Let's go ahead and talk about this matchup. Clemson is going to host NC State. Currently, the line sits at about NC State plus 6.5 or plus 7, depending on where you're shopping and where you're getting. 63% of the bets are on NC State, 71% of the money. There, the total opened at 46, has gone all the way down. I imagine that's weather related. It's now at 40.5 from 46 where it opened. 43% of the bets are on the over, 30% of the money. Most people are favoring the under. I like the under, even not accounting for the weather here. I think that because I like and would lean towards an under, I'm going to go with NC State as an official play here to cover 6.5. And I'll take the next couple of minutes to kind of convince you why. Clemson comes in to this season after a down year last year, which is a crazy thing to say because they won 10 games. And it's just absurd to have a down season where you win 10 games. They've had a kind of up and down offensive year last year. DJU, their quarterback, was worth about negative 35 total EPA, and just really some baffling negative plays that really kind of hurt their efficiency overall. When they could run the ball well, as you saw against Wake Forest last year, they could move the ball, but this year really looking to get the offense back on track. Georgia Tech, they stalled a little bit, ended up winning 41-10 against a pretty rough Georgia Tech team. Only 35-12 against FCS Furman, 48-20 against Louisiana Tech. But then last week against Wake Forest was really encouraged by what I saw from Clemson's offense. They went and scored 51 points, double overtime to pull out the win against a pretty scrappy a pretty scrappy Wake Forest team. That's a key win that they needed to keep their playoff hopes alive, which I think are still certainly very real there. I think by my odds, and the way the schedules break down, they're the fourth most likely team to make the playoffs. So they're sitting pretty if they can win, especially this weekend. Now, NC State, a little bit underwhelming, 21-20 against East Carolina in a game they arguably should have lost. A blowout of FCS Charleston Southern, and then they have Texas Tech, who they pull away from pretty well, and they beat up on Connecticut last week. So kind of nice for NC State in this spot that they effectively get a bye last week against UConn, a team that's just not very good. They can play some of those reserves, get some guys some meaningful reps in kind of low pressure situations, and work some kinks out. So I like that they have a little bit of a spot here, and I think that they're a pretty interesting team. So let's look at the matchups and the profile overall. I had this about 34-30. Clemson over NC State, about a 61.5% chance for Clemson to win this outright, kind of in line with what the books have it. NC State, I have it about 26th in raw EPA per margin, Clemson 12. If you opponent adjust that, it goes to NC State about 20th, Clemson about 15th. So not a huge difference there based on the schedules that they've played, both pretty good. Clemson is definitely more balanced. They're 24th on offense, 20th on defense. NC State is a little more defense heavy. That defense returning so much production that we heard about all offseason, 17th overall, whereas that offense is 51st. When we look at net points per drive, 24th for Clemson, 25th for NC State, very close. Kind of inverted how they got there, though. Clemson is scoring 3.48 points per drive. They're holding opponents to 2.07, whereas NC State is only scoring 2.63, but they're holding opponents to 1.27. Both pretty positive in net field position, both very balanced in their attack. 53.7 rush rate over expected for NC State, 52% rush rate over expected for Clemson. So not a huge tendency to pass a lot or rush a lot depending on the situation. Both very balanced offenses. NC State's been a little better with game control, averaging a 64.4 echo rate, quality possession ratio, That's 9th in the nation. Clemson, not too bad behind it. They're 36th, averaging 57.4 echo ratio. Again, that's just a measure of game control. So that suggests that NC State's controlled the opportunities in a game a little better. They had some issues against East Carolina finishing, but generally I think that NC State is a good bet here for a couple reasons. The first reason, I'll start on the defensive side of the ball for them. Very balanced EPA rush and pass. Clemson, again, on offense, doesn't have a strong lean towards whether they're more efficient in the rushing and the passing. DJU has really found a way to minimize those negative plays. They've limited their upside a little bit. You can see their passing success rate 61st, whereas their EPA per pass is 36. So they really have struggled to get consistency, but they found a way to get some of those big plays without getting those negative plays as well. So a nice kind of balance for them as well. You can see that explosiveness reflected in the fact that they get quality possessions at a 58.7% rate. That's 43rd in the nation, but they finish them at a rate of 5.96 points per quality possession. That's going to be 6th in the nation. So that's some explosive plays. That's some good finishing drives. NC State's defense has been really good at preventing quality possessions. They're 5th in quality possession rate, but they're also 10th in points per quality possession. So when they do let you get a quality possession, it's not a big play touchdown. It's usually a first down inside the 40, and they're limiting the damage there pretty well overall. One thing to note, Clemson's field position has been very bad on average. They're 57th in average starting field position, whereas NC State's defense is holding people to 18th worst or 18th best field position. So kind of a disparity there. Clemson's going to, on average, face a longer field. We would expect that's something to watch. Where I really, really think that NC State has an advantage is kind of the split between early and late downs on defense. So Clemson 113th in avoiding third downs. Again, for offenses, avoiding third downs is a good thing. You hear this talk about third and manageable. Well, the best third and manageable is the third down that doesn't exist. Get a first down on early downs, keep the chains moving, take shots, avoid those unfavorable situations. Well, Clemson lives in those unfavorable situations. They're doing a pretty good job converting them. They're 13th overall on third and fourth down success rate, but they're 66th in early downs EPA. They're finding themselves in holes pretty often. That's worrisome against an NC State team who is holding opponents to negative 0.164 EPA per play on early downs. So negative value on first and second down for NC State's opponents. And then NC State is averaging a 31.7% third and fourth down success rate allowed. So that's 22nd best in the nation. They are across the board very tough defensively. They're not better on early downs relative to late downs. They're very tough. Clemson has kind of been unsustainably living in those third downs. So you look at the Georgia Tech game, they were 8 for 16 on third and fourth downs against Georgia Tech. That's just almost entirely unsustainable against better defenses, and that's really where Clemson has lived. So I'm a little bit worried about that offense. I'm a little bit worried about what they're going to be able to do if they find themselves in third and long consistently. DJU is, completing 63.8% of his passes, 7.9 yards per attempt on a 10.8 ADOT. So really, they're not pushing the ball downfield a ton, but they're kind of consistently moving it. But a lot of that has been third down value that they've created. On the flip side, if we look at Clemson's defense versus NC State's offense, one big thing that stands out to me is a huge split between EPA per rush and EPA per pass. Clemson is 77th in EPA per pass allowed. They're second in EPA per rush allowed. And when we see a big split, what do we automatically think? Selection issues, right? We think that their pass defense is so weak that teams are only rushing in obvious rushing situations when opponents can crowd, when Clemson can crowd the box and use their superior athleticism to stop an obvious run. That tells me that their rush defense might not be the second best in the nation, and their pass defense is getting picked on a little bit. Why that's encouraging for NC State? The Wolfpack is 50th in EPA per pass. They're only 64th in EPA per rush. But if you look at their success rate, you get a good story here where they are 59th in passing success rate, but 50th in EPA per pass. So a little bit more explosive than they are successful in the pass game. That really raises the ceiling of what they can do. And on the flip side, while their rushing efficiency is 64th, right? They're not as explosive. They're 43rd in rushing success rate, 48th in rushing success rate. So they're able to move the ball pretty consistently on the ground, even if they're not super explosive in that. And they have that explosive passing upside. I think Devin Leary is an interesting quarterback. He's somebody this offseason, I think that kind of the offseason content machine overhyped NC State and took a team that's returning a lot of production on defense, is pretty good, and said, hey, they're going to be some kind of miracle next level team. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I do think they're very good. If we look at what they've been able to do passing, Devin Leary, 64% completion, 7.1 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, an average depth of target of 9.8. They have dropped almost 10% of his passes, which is something to watch. You can't miss those opportunities against a team like Clemson. You've got to pull those balls in. But I think overall that he's a competent, experienced quarterback up there. This isn't a talent evaluation. I'm not talking about their future careers, but up there in quality with Sam Hartman around that. I am a little bit worried about what they'll do at wide receiver. I don't think they have a guy the quality of A.T. Perry, for instance, from Wake Forest, but I think their defense is certainly better than Wake Forest's defense. So, some similarities there. And of course, the transitive property in college football doesn't always hold. But some evidence to think that that NC State's balanced offense should be able to move the ball a little bit against Clemson. They're pretty average at quality possession rate and finishing drives, but NC State has been very good at starting field position, and they've been pretty okay, about on par with what Clemson's allowing for early downs and late downs. So not as dramatic a split as we see Clemson's offense between early downs and late downs. Clemson's defense, of course, has been very good on third downs, allowing a 27.5% success rate. So I think we'll see a lot of third downs in this game. I think they'll matter a whole lot. Who can win on third downs, who can scheme and innovate. But I think overall this is going to be a low total. And with a low total, I love taking the underdog here. I think NC State's defense is going to frustrate Clemson's offense. It's going to be a test that the Tigers have not seen all season. And there's evidence to suggest that NC State's offense will be able to sustain drives against Clemson. So give me a game where we have few possessions. We have maybe not a lot of sustained drives and scores, maybe a lot of explosives for scores. I'm going to take the dog here. I like NC State -6.5, -7 if you can get it. Depending on the odds. That's my official play for this week. I think that's a smart bet. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow and Friday with 2 more games this week. Make sure you're following, subscribe to YouTube. That just helps us get all that in order. Follow Parker's Previews on Twitter and me at Stats of War. And you can get the audio version of this, wherever your podcasts are. Follow there, rate us, and all that good stuff. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow. Catch you later.